back to Just Energy Radio with Dr. Rita Louise.
Hello and welcome back to Just Energy Radio. I'm Dr. Rita Louise, and thank you for staying tuned to the second hour of the show. Don't forget, Just Energy Radio is brought to you by SoulHealer.com and the Institute of Applied Energetics. That's AppliedEnergeticsInstitute.com. In this hour, we're going to be talking about love. Or are we talking about love? I don't know. There's so many aspects to that word. And to share that with us, we're going to be speaking to Ed Lorimer about the science and path of true love. You know, because we only want true love, not fake love. Let me tell you a bit about Ed and get him on the air. Ed Gray Lorimer, a.k.a. E. Gray Lorimer, is a former entrepreneur, company founder, and CEO with a lifelong passion for people and the wonderful effect that true love has had on him and persons in his life. He has a bachelor's degree in liberal arts from Penn State and an MBA with an emphasis in marketing and finance. He has received diverse training and numerous certifications in leadership psychology, public affairs, organizational psychology, management and sales, and marketing from various institutions and organizations. He was a very young widower and is currently in the world's greatest true love relationship. So from the artful science of true love, please welcome to Just Energy Radio, Ed Lorimer. Hey, Ed, how are you?
I'm doing great, Rita. How are you doing?
I am great. Now, I have to ask you, your bio is like you're going to come in and fix a company. How did you get involved in this whole love thing? Sorry, I have to say it that way.
I love the way you say that. I kind of have a different path than most people. Most people that talk about relationships and love and how people connect in love, whether it's true love or other types of love relationships, don't come from the background that I come from. I certainly came out of the business realm. I was a military officer for several years on active duty, went the business route, founded and developed and grew and sold off a lot of companies. But I've always been a student of love relationships, and I've really always had a passion for people that have found true love. I always tried to stay around them and learn from them, number one. Number two, there was a very, very specific event that happened in my life. I guess you could call it an emotionally significant event. Several years ago, I was at a friend's wedding, and we were at the reception. It was a beautiful place. It was in Newport, Rhode Island, beautiful spot by the bay. Matter of fact, it was a bed and breakfast in New England style. You almost would have felt like you were about to witness the nuptials of some of the first settlers in the United States. So it was a wonderful venue. Sitting at the reception with my true love, and this older woman comes over and introduces herself. And I guess we were acting like we normally act, kind of like teenagers, eyes locked, that type of a scenario. And this woman introduced herself as a practicing psychologist, and in particular, a couples counselor. And she said the oddest thing. She said the first thing she did after she introduced herself was say, "How long have you guys been together?" And we said, "Well, about 9 months." And she said, "Well, you guys are what's called infatuated." Now, I knew what that meant. But then she followed up quickly by saying, that's going to wear off pretty quickly, and you're going to, come back to reality. And that kind of stuck in my craw. So for about 5 years, I spent the next 5 years, dwelling on that to a certain degree, and, being the type personality I have, started to do a lot of research in the area, and was a little bit dissatisfied with what I uncovered as far as, how mainstream, traditional couples counseling dogma deals with couples relationships and how they, counsel singles to help find love. So after doing a ton of research, I realized, wait a minute, there's a lot of real new science out there that's not become mainstream. You in your show, you talk about energies, and certainly there are energies associated with this. And there are energies associated with levels of our mind that true love couples seem to be able to connect effortlessly on those levels of mind, while other types of love relationships, the partners seem to wrestle with them. So that's kind of my path into becoming an author and writing the artful science of true love.
Well, let's talk about the different kinds of love. And I'm going to share a story. I was at a conference last weekend. It was the ASPE symposium in New Mexico. And the woman who they did a panel discussion with all the speakers, and I don't know, they got into this whole conversation about love. It's all about love. It's all about love, blah, blah, blah. And she got up and said, but I don't really know what love is. I don't know that I've ever experienced it. And it was just really interesting. So I think everybody the whole rest of the weekend tried to talk to her about love. But from your observations and studies, what kinds, are there different kinds of love? And can we be in a relationship with a significant other and have different kinds of love? All right, that was kind of a really big question, but I'll just hand it off to you that way.
I'll do my best. I'm not surprised to find that there was a woman at the conference that you were attending that was wrestling with a very, very basic question of what is love. Traditionally, if you talk to a psychologist, they'll say there are two types of love. There's romantic love that we experience, in relationship with a love partner, and that, certainly comes from the Latin word romanticus, which means like the Romans. So the connotation there, you can imagine, a bunch of people in togas, having a Roman orgy, and I don't think romantic love is far from that. There certainly is a tremendous physical connection associated with romantic love, and it truly is about exploring the physical. The second type of love that I think, traditional psychology, talks about, and psychologists will talk about, is compassionate love. That's, a strong emotional bond, and we can experience compassionate love for, children, for our friends, for, our pets. And, those are the two types, I think, of love historically that people are very comfortable with. What I found in doing research and doing seminars and staying focused on couples that experience true love is that these couples actually get to connect on various levels of mind. And I think the three key levels of mind that they connect on are instinctual, perceptual, and conceptual. And instinctual, of course, refers to the physical. And our instincts are very active in, a love circumstance. We see somebody that comes into our visual acuity, and we know almost instantly if we're attracted to them physically or not attracted to them physically, just based on visual input that we take in through the eyes. The second level, emotional connection, we do that through communication. I think Coleman wrote a great book, Emotional Intelligence, and I think it's pretty mainstream at this point. But we communicate through facial expressions and, hand gestures and body language, paralinguistics or calls, that aren't really words like, if we really like somebody, that might be one we might use. And then, of course, intellectually we connect through the wonderful miracle and gift of language, which enables us to talk about our needs and desires and wants. And, what we found with true love couples in the research is that they really maintain balance at these levels of the human mind with each other. And I think that's the differentiation. I think couples that, what I term an adequate love relationship, which needs are being met, but for some reason both or one of the partners feels like there's something more, that they're not connected, or there are some disconnections that they're experiencing at those levels of mind. And then I think the third type of a love relationship that people can find themselves in all too often is what I call a harmful love relationship. And that's usually indicative of, incessant arguing and fighting and almost trying to cause each other pain, which is a shame. So I think that those are the different types of love that we as humans can experience, and also those are the different types of love relationships that we kind of uncovered through the research. Did that do a good job of answering your question?
Yeah. It seems like, and this is just my observation, that the majority, I'm just going to kind of stick with, long-term relationship, married couples, that, it's not that passionate, intellectual dynamic that's happening between them. It's more, well, it's easier not to go. I don't want to lose the sofa or the lamp. There's a certain comfort level, even though they're not really, I'm going to say, like they love them, so they still use that word, I love you, but they're not, I'm going to say, in love.
Well, I think that's a perfect way to say it, and I think a lot of people can relate to the differentiation between a couple that love each other versus a couple that's in love, and I think we all know couples that are married that still act like they're in the infatuation phase, the early throes of romance, and a lot of us are very envious of that. We want it, we're not quite sure how to get it, and I think that the way to get it. And I think what differentiates true love couples from couples that are in an adequate relationship, which, in some ways is what you're describing. A lot of my needs are being met. I'm very comfortable in my circumstance, but yet I know there's something more. I really want to be more connected to this person. I want to enjoy this person more. I want to enjoy myself more, while I'm with this person. And I think, some of the differentiations are, become very apparent when, they argue, for example. That's a great way to tell the difference between, true love couples and couples that aren't in true love. A lot of couples that are in an adequate relationship, what I find is when they argue, they actually argue to win an argument. There's give and take, and there's compromise involved, and there's, coping involved. When harmful couples argue, couples in a harmful love relationship, what we discovered is that they actually argue to hurt each other. They revel in the fact that their partner feels pain as a result of the argument. The difference with true love couples is they typically argue for resolution. They want to solve a problem and move on. And what happens to them is when they get out of balance, they race to get back into balance. So therefore what they do is when they argue, they really want to resolve the situation and get back into those balance connections. Whereas with the couple you described in an adequate relationship, or most definitely with a couple in a harmful relationship, they're not really experiencing that balance right now. So in a way, they kind of don't know the difference.
It's almost sounding like there is a deeper level of feeling dynamic, more of a kinesthetic, and I'm just kind of reflecting on your words, a kinesthetic thing. I mean, I know that in my relationship space or just in my life, I'm a very kinesthetic person, and when things are out of balance, it makes me crazy. I mean, I just can't be in an environment where there's, discord, energetic or emotional discord, and so I, use my energy or, spend the time to try to bring it back into balance so that there can be a sense of harmony. And it kind of sounds like you're talking about a very similar dynamic between these true love partnerships.
Well, yeah, and picture yourself with somebody on the other side of that who is trying to do the exact same thing. And let me explain why in a love circumstance in particular, and I know that this applies on a broader base in your life, reading your articles and following your radio show. I realize that about you, but for most people in a love circumstance in particular, what happens is when they get out of balance, some of the good brain chemistry that flows in our minds, and you think about infatuation, the infatuation phase, the early throes of romance, you have oxytocin, you have vasopressin, you have dopamine that all flows and makes a great cocktail. It would be a great mixed drink for the local pub to serve. And those brain chemicals flow in a true love relationship when there's discourse. When we come out of balance in a true love relationship, what happens is almost like a drug addict, we start to jones. We start to really feel pain, and we do want to race to get back into balance. And when both people are balanced, they both feel that. So the logical resolution to being out of balance is to race to get back into balance. Majority of couples, unfortunately, the vast majority of couples aren't really in a true love relationship. So again, they're not really sure what that balance feels like. So it's almost like groping in the dark, So they get back to being out of balance when they argue. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. So there's like a serotonin release that happens when the couple is in balance or something like, talk to me.
Well, this is where the new science comes from, and this is what's exciting. And what I found is that, it's almost stripped away from what is mainstream in terms of, couples counseling. Absolutely, studies that have been conducted using PET scans, for example, have revealed beyond a shadow of a doubt that couples who have been together for 10 years, 20 years, can react the same way from an electrical, a bioelectrical or a biochemical response to their partners as couples who have just got together and are in infatuation. And unfortunately, they're far and few between, but yeah, it really is about brain chemistry. It really is about our minds releasing neurotransmitters, our own personal drugstore, releasing those feel-good, chemicals into our brain that make everything in life a little prettier. Make the colors a little brighter and smells a little better. And true love couples have really captured that and do have that good brain chemistry being released on a continual basis in their minds, in their brains. And as long as they stay in balance, that continues to happen. So when they do get out of balance, they race to get back into it. And yeah, it really is about that. The new science comes surprisingly not from behavioral psychology, but from neuroscience.
But what causes it to change? If they have a certain chemistry, brain chemistry, in the infatuation stage, what causes it to change into some other state or brain chemistry that is lessening the dynamic in the relationship?
Well, first of all, let's back up a frame and let's talk about couples that really don't get together for the right reasons. And I think, unfortunately, there's a tremendous amount. Percentages are pretty high. There's a lot of reasons why couples get together, and it's real easy to trump our instinctual level of intelligence to not listen to it. And the instinctual level in the hindbrain and the brain and the actual structure is a separate operating system, and those instincts tell us whether or not it's a good love circumstance through, the sights and smells and tastes and sounds of a potential love partner. We can listen to those and actually become infatuated with that person if there's reciprocation. In other words, if they communicate to us through instinctual communication that, yeah, this is a great genetic fit, then we can certainly respond in kind, and yeah, you may end up with infatuation. But a lot of people get together in love relationships out of convenience. They get together, for dating fatigue reasons. They'll get together, for money. Unfortunately, they'll do that. They'll get together because their culture, the cultural dynamics say they should. For a tremendous amount of reasons that have nothing to do with good brain chemistry flow. And, from day one, if you kind of ignore that and you trump your instincts and you say, you know what, I'm gonna learn how to love this person later, and there really isn't a strong physical mutual attraction, I'm not sure that you haven't set yourself up to be, in an adequate relationship forever. But I think it really starts there.
No, I do counseling, and I have, when you do psychic work, the number one question, Ed, is relationship-based. That is the number one question.
Absolutely.
And following behind that is finances, but we're talking way far behind it. And you would not believe how many women I've had come in and say, well, this is what's going on in my marriage and blah, 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 blah. And it's like complain. And then they want to know if it's going to change. And it's like, no, that's just how it is. And they're like, well, I can't leave because, he makes a lot of money and I'd have to go back to work or some, lame excuse. It's like, well, then stay unhappy. I can't fix it.
Kind of silly, isn't it? Yeah, when you think about it. It's I really don't like it. I'm not really genetically attracted to this person. My instincts tell me every day I shouldn't be with them, but can you please change that for me? It's probably not going to happen. And, then you look
Here's some good drugs, I don't know.
Since you're not releasing your own oxytocin, here's a pill form for you. Yeah, I'm not so sure that you can do anything for people that do get together for the wrong reasons from day one. And I'll give you an example. I was at a cocktail party not too long ago, and a predominant local doctor, a medical doctor, not like yourself, was having some issues with his much younger bride. And just within minutes of observing them as a couple, and I'll let you know a little secret how you can pick out true love couples in a second, but just in observing the dynamics between them, they were both just really not happy. And I could tell in an instant that the younger woman was really not attracted to him physically, and there was never a chance to get the good brain chemistry flowing in their relationship. It was very evident that, after listening to the dialogue between her and some of her friends, that she was quite proud of being a member of the country club, but never once did she talk about how sexy her husband was. You know what I mean? So, I think when you get together for the wrong reasons, it's very, very hard to elevate that relationship into the true love club. Here's a little secret that you can use, and I think you might find it useful if you haven't already figured it out. What I do to identify true love couples is I try to observe how they look at each other when they're not looking at each other.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
Well, if you're having a conversation with somebody else, a third party, how is your man actually looking at you, and vice versa. So you can get a lot of information from observing how they're looking at each other when they're not actually looking at each other. And what I find is that you can really read their facial expressions and their gestures and mannerisms as they're observing their mate. And boy, does it just tell volumes and speak volumes about the type of relationship they're in. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Hey, somebody said, yeah. I'm like, hey, who was that? So if you're kind of like staring at them all melty, drooly and stuff, it might mean you're just a little bit in love kind of thing?
Exactly. And, we downplay that, and, we associate with teenagers, but again, you see that 60-year-old couple that still behaves that way, and we all get a little envious. The other thing, emotionally, I think it's very, very important. When emotional connections are formed correctly, I think that also is a very differentiating factor. So you can have couples that are instinctually attracted to each other. They're good fits, and their instincts are telling them, hey, we're going to be able to have very healthy children and good-looking children and all that goes with the instinctual level of attraction. On an emotional level, there's also things that true love couples do that other couples don't do. Number one, beyond anything, and I know you're very familiar with this, Rita, they truly value each other's emotions. It's not uncommon to hear them have a conversation, and the one person, one of the couples will say, one of the partners will say, I feel really bad when you do this. And in a true love couple, what we observe almost 100% of the time, the response to that question won't be, well, I need to do that, or, I don't care about how you feel. The response to that will be, listen, I never want you to feel bad or sad or mad. I definitely don't want that. I wasn't aware that you felt that way. Certainly don't want you to feel that way. And then there's an ensuing, conversation of connection. Maybe it's something that's important and I can't change it immediately. But the precursor to it is that they bona fidely, they truly don't want them to feel that. And you can see it in their face. You can see it in their body language. You can see it in their, gestures as they make those statements. And it's real. And I think that's a huge part of connecting, emotionally, through that min brain or that old mammalian brain, that limbic system. This brain has been evolving for 500 million years, and it has separated operating systems. It truly does. And those operating systems come to their own conclusions, unfortunately. We try to bring it all up into concept so that we can talk about it through language skills, but the reality of the situation is that they very much operate independently of each other and come to their own decisions. Again, as humans, we have the ability to bring it up into concept and trump that But the reality is that those are the communications and that level of communication, the facial expressions, the body language, the gestures, that really give us the cues as to whether or not, a couple is in balance. And really caring about the way that your partner feels and respecting those feelings and providing a safe place to discuss those feelings is just paramount for a couple to be in true love. It really is.
I'm going to kind of shift this here. I want to come back to where we are, but I think we need to kind of even take a bigger step back. Why is it important to even have true love in the first place? And I have an example. I have a friend who is Indian. It's a gentleman, and he's getting married, I don't know, sometime in this next year to a woman that he was betrothed to by his family. I mean, it's an arranged marriage, and they're going to get married. And actually, I've done readings for individuals who have been in an arranged marriage. It's like, so, what's love got to do with it?
Well, I don't know what your personal views are on, socially or governmentally arranged marriages. I am not a big fan of arranged marriage, and I think that most cultures have moved away from that, and that's good news. Unfortunately, many times the female in the situation has no say in it, and historically they certainly have had no say in it. And I've seen a tremendous amount of couples who have gone through arranged marriages and with just horrific results. I'm giving you an example of a Pakistani doctor who really loves his wife. He's very attracted to her. He's crazy about her. He really wants, and his wife is just not attracted to the guy. She never was from day one. It was an arranged marriage, and now they have all kinds of issues. And he will use every intelligence. This guy's super intelligent. He will use every intelligent argument on the planet to defend the cultural paradigm of arranged marriages and say, oh, no, this is good and this is groovy and this is the way to go, and not one intelligent argument about why his wife really is not attracted to him and doesn't like him very much. And all too often, unfortunately, that's the result, I've had another guy who's a lawyer, an Indian lawyer, described to me his new wife by saying, well, she's a real good catch because she's a dentist and she has a very good practice. Now, that's just not the words that a true love couple would use to describe a guy in a true love relationship would use to describe his mate. So I'm not sure where you stand on arranged marriages. Where do you stand? I mean, do you think they're good, or do you think they work?
They can have good points as far as you go into them in a different perspective. I mean, this is just the person that you're married to, and now you're like a little corporation.
Yeah,
when I've read,
I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah. But when I've read women in particular that have been in arranged marriages, it's like there's not love, period. And there's not really the thought of experiencing love, that kind of love, the love of a partner in their life. And so if, like I have one client who her husband passed away, and so, she's not old, and so the possibility of getting married again is very much there, but it's like she almost doesn't even know she doesn't know how to date, and there's some definite loss. And there's not an understanding or an awareness of what it's like to be infatuated or to have those feelings of love for anybody, even if they're, just infatuation or lust or whatever, because she's never experienced it.
Well, in 1963...
It's kind of sad.
in 1963 in this country, a young lady named Betty Friedan wrote a book called The Feminine Mystique. You might be very familiar with that work. Mm-hmm. And, in that work, she talked about housewives, it's from the 50s and early 60s, that really were not satisfied with playing the role of a housewife. They just were not happy and fulfilled. And, I think the advertising companies at the time, put all kinds of ads into every type of product saying how wonderful and lucky you are to be a housewife and to fulfill your husband's needs and to, you know, raise your children. But in general, women were really unhappy with that. And I look back, and I would say that a lot of marriages, you know, prior to that work, which kind of changed the dynamic, really changed the matrix for a lot of women in America, prior to that work were pretty much arranged marriages. So I think it's run the course in this country and run the test of time, and I just don't think it works. And I think you hit the nail on the head. I think a marriage in particular, but any love relationship in particular, that's devoid of strong physical, you know, mutual attraction, is a business arrangement.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually write that in the book. I mean, there's a whole chapter on it in the book. So, I mean, I
but
think
even if you think of,
simple.
you know, the pioneers, you know, that, you know, or the people, you know, early Americans, you know, like that you see in the movies, you know, and the, you know, it's like this was your role and that's your role, and no matter, you know, from a, you know, like, so the guy might come home drunk and beat the crap out of her, but it's kind of like, but she doesn't have anywhere to go, so she's just kind of a prisoner there. But I have one other piece of commentary. It's like, you know, World War II took a lot of women and put them into industry and put them into jobs. And after the war was over, they were all sent home. After having a different experience, it's like, hey, you let the genie out of the bottle, and now you're trying to stick it back in. And I don't think it worked very good.
No, and, you know, after World War II, I think there was still a lot of fear and uneasiness, you know, as to the next World War, because we kind of rolled right into the Cold War with Russia. I think that kind of fed the whole thing of you're going back into the bottle, but it didn't work. And I think, you know, the feminine mystique helped to undo that. I think, you know, since then there's been some good works along those lines as well, and certainly good reads for your listeners. And if they're interested in that, I think they should start with Betty Friedan. But, you know, I mean, yeah, the role of women has changed, and I know you're a student from following you of alternate, you know, history. And you've written articles on it, and I know you enjoy it. If we could go back a long way, just for a second, and I don't want to dwell on this, but I believe that, you know, prior to individualistic cultures, prior to civilization, when we lived in smaller bands, I honestly believe that women were probably the repository of learning. I mean, they were probably the libraries for the clan and most likely the teachers of the clan. And I have no doubt that they included emotional intelligence in their teachings. You know, they taught how to read somebody's emotional state, moods, etc., through facial expressions, through body language, through, you know, gestures. And I think when we became individualistic cultures and, you know, men took over power, I think there truly was a subjugation of women in those roles, and wealth became far more important than learning, you know, the social dynamics of love relationships, and that's kind of unfortunate. And the good news is I think we're getting out of it today. The bad news is that I'm not so sure that there's a whole lot of great guidance out there on how to form, you know, connections in relationships and love relationships that lead to the path of true love. You know, I think, for example, most marriage counselors, couples counselors, and, you know, it's not their fault by any stretch of the imagination, but I don't think most of them deal with the root question. And here's why it's not their fault. I think they're great at what they do, and I think they provide insightful advice, and I think it works. But I think the basic question is truly flawed, Rita. No couple has ever walked into a couples counselor's office and said, listen, the woman says, listen, I want to find true love. If it's with this guy, that's great. If not, I don't care. I want true love. That's not the question that they ask. The question is, hey, we're having issues in our marriage, we're having issues in our relationship, and we really want to stay together. We really want to fix it. Well, we have just duty-bound you as a counselor or someone as a counselor to help us stay together. So we turn to John Gray, we turn to John Gottman, and we get coping skills. We develop a set of coping skills, of compromising skills, or we develop a set of communication skills that actually does help us stay together in, you know, what may very well be a dysfunctional relationship. or helps us stay together a little longer before we head to the stone steps of divorce court. And, that's kind of sad. But in a way, the couple does duty-bound the counselor to help them do that. When I think the more fundamental question is how do I find true love? And how do I become happy? And how do I become one of those people that walks around in kind of a cool state of bliss all day?
Well, and I think the number of people that experience true love compared to the number of people is microscopic. Maybe it's because we don't know how. My personal opinion is that we're not willing to be picky enough. And I don't mean like over picky, but listening to ourselves and identifying what our own needs are in the relationship so that they can be met.
Yeah, I think there are three prerequisites that I really put forth in the book, and I again, this is a little bit of Ed's opinion, but and some scientific research mixed in there. I think fundamental, the first rule, if you will, I think there are three prerequisites. The first prerequisite is that both people have to be sane and sober. I mean, that might sound silly, and
okay, I'm laughing.
that might sound a little sophomoric, but the reality of the situation is that there are a lot of people that really don't like themselves at the end of the day, or like who they are. And I'm not talking about a few, shedding a few vanity pounds or making a couple extra bucks in your paycheck at the end of the week. I'm talking about people who fundamentally really just do not like who they are as a person. There are some other people, a lot of people getting their judgment out of a pill bottle or out of a bottle of alcohol. And I think they exclude themselves from being able to connect in a meaningful way by fitting into those categories. The second thing that I think is critical is that strong physical mutual attraction that we talked about. I think that is just so critical. I mean, if you don't think that, your partner that you're going to mate with, in theory for life, is all that in a bag of chips and just the sexiest person on the planet, and they don't turn you on a genetic level and get your engine running, you probably shouldn't end up marrying them. You're probably not going to get into the true love club if you do. And then the third thing that I think, and this is so easy to understand, yet so hard to do, the third thing is I think you got to be willing to grow. As what I find with true love couples is they really grow with each other. So even if they have their personality preferences may be very different. For example, Rita, you may be a perceiver and I may be a judger. We're able to actually imprint on each other through growth, and I adopt, some of your idiosyncrasies, and you adopt some of my personality traits over time, and we actually become bigger and smarter people, bigger intellectually and smarter intellectually as a result of that growth. Most couples, unfortunately, miss the boat on that one, whereby, their way is right, and they're very concerned about the why. Well, Rita, why do you think that way? Why do you feel that way? In true love couples, I don't think they dwell on that question very much at all. I mean, I think they're bona fidely interested in opinion and feeling. So in a matter of saying it, simplifying that statement, I think true love couples really do grow together, while other couples learn how to compromise and cope and give something away from their mental self. True love couples seem to add to their mental self.
So there was a question in the chat room about gay relationships and true love. So can people of the same sex experience true love?
I think that's a wonderful question. And I got to be honest with you, I'm actually not an expert in that area, and I would never claim to be. But I think true love is kind of blind. I really don't think, it matters a hill of beans what culture you're from, what your sexual orientation is. Absolutely. I see no reason in any research I've done and in any people I've ever encountered, straight or gay, that prohibit a gay couple from experiencing true love.
That was easy.
Yeah.
Because to me, love is love. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. You brought up an interesting point earlier that I'd like to just go back to, and it involves more to do with singles. But I think it also can play in a long-term, love relationship. And, you are very familiar with the law of attraction. And, it's something that I find it extremely interesting, your take on it. And I really appreciate it, and I agree with you 100%. I had a young woman, she wasn't that young. I guess she was, in her late 30s. So I guess that doesn't make her that young. But she had a question for me at one of the seminars I was doing afterwards. And she said, where are all the good guys? And, why am I having such a hard time meeting a good guy? And I was looking at her, and, she was just giving off this horrible vibe, and she didn't even realize it. And I said to her, we all wear two faces every day. I said, we wear the face, when we're driving on the LBJ Expressway there in Dallas, or the LIE up on Long Island, right? You know the face I'm talking about when you're stuck in traffic. And you just want to get out of there and cursing at everybody.
That face.
That's the face. And then we all have another face that unfortunately we don't bring out all that often. And I asked her to regress just with me for a second. I said, placate me, humor me. So I want you to think about the last time that you were head over heels infatuated with somebody. I want you to recall a specific day, the sights, the smells, the sounds. I want you to pull up the emotion, which should be pretty easy for you. Pull up the emotionality of that day. Well, Rita, let me tell you, she got the biggest smile on her face, and she started to glow. And I said, there you have it. I said, that's where all the guys are. They are with the women who wear that face every day. And she just so small. She was a professional. I mean, she owned a couple jewelry stores. She was very, very successful. She called me a couple weeks later and said, oh, my God, I met this great guy. And she was so happy. And I said, see, what you got to do is you got to prepare yourself for it by wearing that face that you really want to wear for the rest of your life, not the one that you're wearing on the Philadelphia Expressway there. I mean, that's not the one you want to wear. So sometimes
and people
simple.
don't really get So I mean, sometimes people really don't get their I like saying their bad mojo. You got bad mojo. One of the things that I have found with my clients, I mean, there's definitely the bad mojo thing, but the other thing is sometimes intellectually, they say they want to be in a relationship, but when you start, for me, looking at their energy, it's kind of like they think, I'm too busy, I got this going on, I have most of my clients are women, it's like, men suck, no offense, I'm just reporting it here, and they have these issues, but it's like, okay, you want to get in a relationship, and that's your question, but here are all the things that are saying, well, that's really not what I want. So which do you want?
And, women, I've found, and this woman in particular that I described to you had a long laundry list of what traits she wanted in her man. He had to make a certain amount of money. He had to drive a certain car. He had to, be a certain height and a certain amount of good looks. And, I mean, the list went on and on and on. And it's like, I tried to explain to her to the best of my ability that attraction and love really doesn't work that way. Your instincts, at the instinctual level of intelligence in your mind, they're not smart enough to incorporate that list in a genetic way and pick up on a guy that's going to meet that criteria. So, the best thing you could do is the very next guy that you actually find physically attractive, don't trump your instincts immediately. At least get to meet the guy and know him. You might find out he's a pretty good guy, even though he doesn't drive a Bentley.
Mhm. So I can trump you. I had a client who was determined to marry Troy Aikman. She was like, she was going to law of attraction, law of Troy Aikman right into her life. And I was like, okay, good luck with that.
I love talking to you about this because you just have a wealth of knowledge in the area, and it's just so much fun. I call it True Love Buzzkills in the book, and I have a subchapter entitled True Love Buzzkills, and underneath that I talk about love traps, I talk about unrealistic expectations, and I talk about knowledge gaps. And, unrealistic expectations, certainly marrying Troy Aikman since he's already married is probably an unrealistic expectation, but in a more broad sense of the word, you know, a lot of men and women, both sexes, come to a relationship with entitlements. You know, we're going to get married, or we're going to have this love relationship, and we're going to be exclusive. And from now on, I'm completely entitled to you making sure I'm happy and making me happy every day. I'm entitled to, you know, not only am I entitled to you making me happy every day, I'm entitled to this and that and the next thing. And the reality of the situation is true love couples don't have a sense of entitlement whatsoever. They don't feel they're entitled to any of that. You know, and it's so almost counterintuitive when you think about it. You would think that they would be the most entitled people. They really don't have that sense of entitlement. What they have is a sense of balance. They actually want their partner to be happy. They almost have a reverse sense of entitlement whereby they want their partner to be happy, but they don't feel compelled that they have to produce every day. You know, they don't feel they have to be the Gunga Din to make the other person happy. And I find that a lot of relationships, you know, migrate to, you know, adequate or harmful as a result of those entitlement type issues. Also priority. I mean, I know you've written about this. You know, when we start to feel that we're not a priority, and, you know, kids come into the picture, and careers, and, you know, extended family and everything else, and we start to feel that we're no longer the priority for, you know, our love partner, you know, we can remember just how easy it is to go find somebody who would treat us like a priority. So, you know, it's very important to keep, you know, your love partner as a priority in your life, and true love couples seem to do that effortlessly. It's not something they work on. It's not something they have to compromise with the rest of their life to make happen. And, you know, I think if there's a message for the listeners out there who are either wrestling in a relationship or are single and about to enter a relationship, is to keep in mind that, you know, you got to keep your partner as a priority, and you can't just have unrealistic expectations and put them on your partner every day. It's not their job to make sure you're happy every day. So.
And that is very important, especially if there are kids involved. You know, sometimes your folks can get so taken off the marriage dynamic or the partner dynamic and get put onto, I'm going to say, the family dynamic, and just get lost in it.
Yeah, and I in the book I really write ad nauseum almost about, you know, making sure that you stay as the center of the bullseye. You know, those kids are going to get along just fine witnessing you guys being incredibly in love with each other. As a matter of fact, you're only going to help teach them how they can get that when they become adults. You know, the extended family is going to be just fine if you guys still make googie eyes at each other at the Thanksgiving dinner table. You know, keeping your partner at the center of the bullseye and the concentric circle surrounding them as lower priorities is critical. It really is. It might sound selfish to some listeners, but it really is a critical part of it.
Well, talking about selfish, I mean, one of the things that I see in a lot of relationships are, I mean, we're talking about balance and dynamics, but of these relationships where we have an enabler and I don't know, I just call him taker person. Do you have any comment on that as far as, you know, what's going on, and if someone finds themselves in that kind of situation, what they can do to maybe create some more balance in their relationship?
You know, we're almost leaving the realm of my expertise and entering the realm of your expertise. I truly believe that when it comes to true love, you know, you don't have takers. You have two givers is what you have. And there are times when you are the taker because it's just so appropriate and it just feels so good, and you're not apologetic for taking at that point in time, and your partner is certainly happy to give. But it really is a balance there, and you know, you have to feel good about what you're giving. I don't think that my opinion would be that I don't think it's a very healthy relationship if you constantly feel like you're giving and you don't want to give. Your desire is not to give, or you know you shouldn't give because you're not receiving anything in return. As a matter of fact, I think you wrote about this. I can remember somebody writing about it in an article I just read not too long ago, where it's quite unhappy and unbalanced to continually give. I would recommend you stop giving immediately and you know, talk about it and discuss it and say, listen, this makes me feel really bad. If your partner says, I don't care that you feel bad, I just want to keep taking, then maybe it's time to move on.
See, you and I both have that, like, hit the road kind of mentality around relationships.
Well, you know what? This divorce, there are some pandemic statistics in our society today here in the United States, and they just are being shoved under the carpet. Nobody wants to talk about them. 58 million women single, 50 million men, 18 million women living alone, the divorce rate burgeoning over 50%. That doesn't include people that never got married, that split up. If that's not a pandemic, I'd like somebody to define the word to me, because I have a misunderstanding of it. Do you know what I mean, Rita?
Mm-hmm. See, I've never had that problem, but of being alone and single. So, or not for very long. How's that?
Yeah, and again, I think if you go to the traditional school of psychology, you know, again, you burden the counselor with, you know, hey, help us stay together, and, you know, they're kind of compelled, you know, by their profession to help you do that. Eventually, you know, you do end up, you know, heading to divorce court. So, you know, I think we need to really have a paradigm shift, and I think the Artful Science of True Love is maybe a good start towards a paradigm shift, to ask a different question. You know, to not settle, like you said, for something that's less than true love, and to really get on the path of true love by understanding, you know, the various levels of our mind, how they work within our mind, and then how they connect with a partner's mind in a love circumstance. I think that's quintessential to help more people get on the path of true love, and that's certainly, you know, the reason I wrote the book, and certainly the reason I did all the research. I'm working on a second book, as a matter of fact, that it's going to be a series of case studies of comparisons for, you know, couples that actually have gone into the 3% club. And let me explain that. You know, based on a lot of the recent scientific neurological studies that I talked about. Couples, they'll put that a little below 10% in terms of couples that they feel react the same way, you know, biochemically, as they did, you know, 20 years ago. In the early throes of romance, they still have those types of brain reactions, the chemical releases in the brain. But when you consider the single people in the world, it drops down to 3%. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So
that would be interesting.
You know, that's kind of. Yeah, you know, that's like you said, it's minuscule, unfortunately. So, you know, it'd be nice to help a couple more.
I mean, it's just sad that, you know,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm in a totally true love relationship this time, and it's great, and I walk around smiling and happy, and he walks around smiling and happy, and we're smiling and happy and freaking goofy as all get it. You know, I mean, I'm goofy enough by myself, and then you put the two of us together in a room, and that's really scary because we get even goofier, you know.
Is this guy, now let me ask you this, is this man the sexiest man alive?
Is he what?
The sexiest man alive?
He is. Actually, that's what
Absolutely.
I call him, even though he's probably going to say, I can't believe you just said this on the radio.
Absolutely. You know, and that, you know, that's so important, and it's just great to hear that, and I'm so happy for you and proud of you that you know, you were able to really get it right.
Well, you know, it took a couple of times.
Well, you know, it usually does. You're not alone in that category. But, you know, I think there is a lot of good that can be done if we change the matrix, if we look at it as a different dynamic, if we start to realize that there are energies at the different levels of our mind that do connect with the other levels of people's minds, and we learn what those signs are and how to interpret them correctly. I think we all know it, and we all have the ability to pick up on, you know, emotional cues and instinctual cues. I think sometimes we just choose to ignore them.
I agree. Ed, I think that was just a perfect segue right into that music.
Is our time up already?
our time is up already.
Wow.
And thank you so much. Well, I'll just have to have you back, okay?
Oh, I would love to come back. I so enjoyed it. You are such a wonderful host, and the multitudes of followers that you have, you know, they just get so much from you every week, and it's just wonderful to be a part of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. And we need to go before the music cut me off. Okay, that was Ed Lorimer. His book is The Artful Science of True Love. Next week, we have Klaus Donna talking about the unsolved mysteries of the ancient kind, a show you don't want to miss. Anyway, I'm Dr. Rita Louise. This is Just Energy Radio. Be blessed.
Join host Dr. Rita Louise each week at this time for Just Energy Radio. Point your browser to www.justenergyradio.com for more show information and to contact Dr. Rita.